Welcome to the Idea to Value podcast, where in every episode we highlight the latest insights into creativity and innovation from experts around the world. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn. I care about the evidence behind what makes ideas happen, and I've already helped thousands of people just like you through my unique insights into recent scientific findings of how creativity works. I also show you how to turbocharge innovation programs so they finally deliver on the value and ideas you've been struggling to execute. Get your free training on how creativity can be improved by registering now at www.ideatovalue.com. Now let's get on with today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Idea to Value podcast. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn, and I'm thrilled to have back with me Professor Mark Batey from the Manchester Metropolitan Business School. He's the founder of Release Your Epic, and he's also a very influential researcher on the topic of creativity and science. Professor Batey, it's wonderful having you here.
Thank you, Nick. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. So the last time we spoke, we talked about some of your research at that point into how creativity is working, how to improve it. I understand that you've got a couple of new pieces of research in the last 4 years that might be interesting. So just very, very quickly, for people who haven't heard from you before, just a quick background as to where you got started and where you are now with creativity.
I'll try and do the edited version, and as a motor mouth, I'll just cut the plug if I keep talking too much, Nick. I knew I wanted to be a psychologist at the age of about 11, and around about the ages 15, 16, I realized the kind of psychology I wanted to do was not clinical psychology. I just got to engage with patients. And sometime after, I got really interested in creative thinking, how and why people think in unusual, different ways. And that followed me through my whole psychology career, culminating with a PhD in the psychometric investigation of everyday creativity at UCL, and then becoming a full-time academic, continuing just to study creativity and innovation, everything from individuals up to governments.
I mean, that's had a huge, broad range of research. And you and I were talking briefly before we started the interview. There's two things that we want to talk about today, two of your most recent pieces of research. One is around the environment, the sort of working environment and home environment, the impact that has on your creativity, and also a topic that you call malevolent thinking and malevolent creativity. So let's get started on the first one. Tell us about this research onto the environment and how that affects creativity.
Yeah, so I guess it started off with the premise that most of the study, the academic study, the research, the science around creativity, innovation, it almost always started off with the individual. So how do you think, Nick? What are your values? What is your personality? What motivates you? Why might your early experiences as you grew up had an impact on how creative you are? We then thought a bit about teams and leadership. The one thing we haven't paid all that much attention to actually is the physical environment we sit in. Much like a goldfish in a goldfish bowl is probably not that aware of the water in the bowl around them and just takes it for granted. I think our office space and physical space design that we sit in at work, or certainly in pre-COVID times we used to sit in at work, have a massive impact on us. So with some collaborators started looking into that. So we did a number of experiments, and if I try and boil them down to the most simple ways, what we tried to do is very carefully, without telling the people involved in the experiment, change the environment around people and got them to do some different tasks. In terms of changing the environment, to keep it really simple, in one context, there's a great big nature poster, beautiful nature poster. In the other, there wasn't a nature poster. No, nothing else is different between the two groups. Don't tell anyone anything. You put them in the room and you get them to do individual creative tasks, solving a problem, and some group tasks. It was a marketing brainstorming exercise, working in groups. We then get independent judges who don't know who the people are, they've never met them, and they don't know the design of the study. They then rate how creative were the people, the stuff that I've seen. What we found is around about a 15% jump, maybe a 10% jump or so, that the people who were in the room with the poster were rated by independent people as a bit more creative and a bit more original in their thinking than the people who didn't have a poster. Edited highlights, why does that matter? Well, if having a view window out, the window beside you, looking out at nature, if you can't do that, having a poster of nature or a house plant or a pot plant in front of you, chances are it might help you feel a bit more healthy and possibly a little bit more creative in your thinking.
I mean, I assume that applies just to divergent thinking, though.
In terms of the nature stuff, no, actually, there's a vast majority of data that shows that, and actually the most beginning studies tended to focus on everyday mundane tasks. People doing really boring stuff like data entry, checking for errors in sentences, often done with undergraduate students. And they found that a view of nature or a poster of nature, people tended to improve their performance on those relatively mundane tasks. What our new research shows is it also seems to follow through for more complex creative thinking. We are right, Nick, we were looking at divergent thinking, but other researchers have shown that it seems to just show a benefit, full stop. Having nature in and around us is probably beneficial to us in many different ways.
It's interesting you say that just the poster representing nature seems to have had a similar effect as having a view of actual plants.
Certainly, that we can't tell that from our study, so I must be very careful not to get too excited and overclaim. What I do know is the other studies tend to show that. So our study showed a difference of no poster versus a poster. Lots of other studies, go back to some of the original research by a chap called Ulrich, which I found very fascinating. He wasn't interested in creativity and environment at all, actually more around things like health, and looking about the fact that hospital patients who had a view of a window needed less painkillers and tended to recover quicker. He then moved on to look at things like a view of window in prison environments and found that prisoners who can see a window commit far less crimes and don't get in so much trouble when they're in prison. We've just taken that sort of strainer of research and taken it through into creative thinking and creative problem solving too.
How do you think companies can use this insight to not only get brainstorming sessions to work more effectively, but to actually improve the creative output of their company?
That's a really good question. I guess I'd have to probably provise it of whether we're talking about a coronavirus scenario, which of course we're in now, and maybe considering for some time, but being much more general, I think there's a lot of things that we can take into account. At the individual level, it's probably a good idea when you're working, especially if you're feeling a bit dull, you're feeling a bit down, or need some inspiration, maybe get to a view where you can see out of a window, or maybe change your view so you can see a slightly different natural environment. If you can't do that at an individual level, have a plant on your desk. Maybe have a screensaver on your desktop, which occasionally be a lovely photograph you took when you were out in nature. Something can remind you and can keep giving you that stimulation of nature. I think at the organizational level, and some of the things I'm helping companies with, is starting to set up their thinking about the physical environment as not just a thing that we bought, we just moved our people into, but deliberately physically shaping it, starting to think of it as a resource for creativity. And some of the really interesting research that I've come across, for example, looks at how different types of spaces can be used for different things. So you might have a creative space which is about you and I solving a problem together, collaborating, but there might be another creative space which might be about shaping our motivation. So we might be sharing motivational statements or something about our values. Maybe for our creativity and innovation, we need a making space. We need a table and instruments and start shoving things together and welding or sticking things together. So there's lots of different types of spaces that we might use for being creative. I think the most important thing is not just leaving it to chance. If you can use the environment better, we might as well. And if it's as simple as, in some cases, a decent view out of a window or a pot plant on a desk, it's not particularly all that challenging to implement.
I mean, that's a fascinating piece of research. I think a lot of companies are already sort of thinking of different ways that they could adjust their offices to make that work. Let's move on to the other piece of research, which might be even more interesting. This concept of malevolence and malevolent creativity. This is the first time I've heard of it. So could you just give us a sort of brief highlight as to what you mean by it, what sort of research it has been, and what you found?
Yeah, I think it's me too. It was relatively new to me, and it is a relatively new research field, full stop. Its origins are perhaps a little older, but it started off along the lines of, I think there's a chap in about mid-90s when, isn't there a tendency to just think that everything that's creative is always good? If it's a creative idea, it's innately good, it's innately positive. And as someone who's fully signed up to the whole sort of creativity thing, I like to try and agree. But actually, go back to 1948, and Schumpeter, the economist, said that all creation is effectively a destructive act. If you make something new, you're normally pushing something else out the way, or you're destroying an older product, process, service, or concept. So there's been at the root the idea that there could be something bad, if you like, that might come out of creativity. I think the thing that gave it its real push, probably, if we're honest, is the Twin Towers 9/11 incident gave about an idea of great creativity and great industry and innovation, but being used for an unbelievably demonic reason. In order to be, in terms of the definition, malevolent creativity is creativity that has been deliberately designed to harm or damage others. When you're being creative, you're coming up with new and useful ways of doing things, but to really hurt people. That might be a very extreme example. If we think about today, fraud, the amount of fraud there is of people sending phishing emails and trying to get you to enter your details, people selling fake goods in the current environment, people selling fake face masks, for example. Hopefully it's not going to happen to us, but I'm sure you may have come across the term Zoom bombing, which is people coming across people's Zoom meetings and then maybe sharing more of themselves than the people in the meeting might actually want to see. So these malevolent acts are kind of, they're there from the very small to the very big. For me, where it really started was actually looking at some of our supposedly esteemed political leaders often saying things and using tactics that seemed to be very creative, but didn't seem to be for the greater good. They actually seemed, you might argue, being creative, evil geniuses. So that's where the research started for us. And in particular with my collaborators, we've been looking at the psychological predictors of when and why people are likely to be highly malevolently creative. From the individual perspective, those people who have slightly elevated tendencies towards psychopathy, yeah, that word, psychopath type tendencies, cold, callous, maybe a bit impulsive, can be prone to that. But we've also looked at the environment as well, and we found that certain types of language that we might be exposed to, which I think we could extrapolate to different values and behaviors that we see around us, might change us as well. So if your leader acts in a rather cruel and callous way, chances are you might think it might be okay to do that a little bit more yourself. And that's kind of the stuff we've been looking at the moment around malevolent creativity.
And has there been any sort of research around this? Is this more still a theoretical construct?
Yeah, there's a lot of research going on in the area, some great names in the area. So a chap called David Cropley has been doing some fantastic work, and a lady called Hansika Kapoor in India, but now currently studying in America, who I'm also collaborating with at the moment, have been for the last 6 or 7 years doing a lot of different types of research on where does it come from, how does it manifest itself, and hopefully what might we be able to do to lessen the chances of malevolent creativity and keep it on the benevolent and the good side.
Is there maybe sort of one tip that we know already that we can use to be aware of it and to sort of have some healthy cynicism or healthy criticism when we see the impacts of what someone's saying?
Yeah, I think that's one single tip. I try to boil it down and try and be vaguely evidence-based. Is probably to be aware of our own biases. I think most of the time, when someone else does something cruel or horrible or malevolent, we think, what a horrible person. And we don't think there might be any circumstances behind their actions that could have led them to get there. But when we look at ourselves, we have a very strong tendency to make all sorts of excuses of why we're a bit mean or a bit nasty or a bit horrible. So we should probably start with ourselves and just question, am I reframing things that, well, I couldn't possibly be malevolent now, I didn't do anything wrong, but actually be a bit more soul searching. There's the possibility that we might have swept under the carpet some of our own misdemeanors. So I think it starts with us. I think the next thing that we might do, and I'm sure I see this quite often, is if you see malevolence, even if it's smallest forms, is politely calling it out, actually mentioning that's what that thing that somebody said might be not all that helpful or particularly caring. And in the context of it being a service user or a customer, when someone says something a bit malevolent about how we might treat our customers or our service users, it's probably our duty to point it out. You know, we could be a bit more empathic and a bit more benevolent rather than malevolent.
I think one of the big questions around this malevolent concept, especially in relation to our own biases, is the intentionality of it. Is it malevolent if you are just ignorant of your own ignorance, the sort of Dunning-Kruger effect, or what's your view on that?
For us, our definition is the deliberate intent to harm. So by accident, being a complete moron and accidentally doing something incredibly creative that hurts other people is an unfortunate discovery. I think we're focusing on the people who do it entirely on purpose, and that there's a deliberate aspect to what they do. Because I guess accidents will happen once in a while. People who deliberately do it are maybe the ones who need the most help, or the most that we could do to weed them out of our organizations in the first place.
Mark, it's been wonderful speaking with you. If people want to find out more about you and the sort of research you do, or the projects you do, what's the best place they can go to find out more?
If you put Mark Batey, B-A-T-E-Y, into Google, you can't usually go far wrong. It's a relatively unusual surname. There's not many of us. I tend to come up reasonably high. And I've got my own website, which shares some various downloads, free stuff, information about some of my research, and in some cases, free access to my papers, often which are hidden behind institutional paywalls, but I found a way of being able to share them in an open access way. That's drmarkbatey.com.
Perfect. I'll make sure to get that link down in the description below.
Thank you.
Mark, it's been wonderful speaking with you, and I look forward to speaking again with you soon.
Thanks very much, Nick. Have a great evening. Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave me a comment about what you thought and what you'd like to see more about. If you want to take your creativity and innovation capabilities to the next level, then invest in yourself with the premium training only available at ideatovalue.com. These exclusive training modules have all been put together by me, Nick Skillicorn, and have been used by thousands of artists, innovation leaders, and CEOs to become better at understanding the source of their creativity and executing on their innovation ambitions. And there is no risk to you, as they're backed by our money-back guarantee. Now, don't forget to go out there and make your ideas a reality. See you again soon.